State management is a common concept in software applications. State can occur when parts of a screen need to change based on context. Context could be things like the user's permission, prior actions the user has taken, or things like selected tabs in toolbars or panels. Not keeping track of these important contexts in your usability testing can lead to all sorts of user confusion that has nothing to do with what you're trying to test. In most basic prototyping tools, managing states of multiple views on screen at the same time becomes a tedious and exponentially complicated affair. Figma just released a bunch of new advanced prototyping features in June 2023, and I want to see if they can make this common scenario any easier. I'm going to compare it to my longtime advanced prototyping tool favorite, Axure 10. Do you think that this is going to be any easier in Figma now? Hi, I'm Hannah, and this is the second of these advanced prototyping challenge videos. If you want to see more, the first is linked in the description below, and you can subscribe to get notified when the next challenge is uploaded. In this challenge, we're going to prototype a screen that has 3 key components: a main content area, a toolbar, and a panel. Each of these components is going to have 2 possible states or views, though in real work it's possible for there to be so many more. With 3 components and 2 views each, there are 8 possible combinations. In the boxes and arrows style of prototyping that InVision, Sketch, XD, and Figma used for years, each of these combinations has to be set up, managed, and linked between. This was so tedious to set up, let alone manage if anything needed to change later. This was the main reason I entirely abandoned doing any type of prototyping in these tools, even though I fell in love with their UI design capabilities. In the basic version of our prototype, the views or states will change based on a click in the component itself. And this is something I'm pretty sure that Figma can pull off based on our results from our last challenge. But I want this to be a challenge. So once we've completed our basic version, I'm going to make a more complex version that has a click within the main content area change the detail panel as well. This is the kind of situation that Axure was really built to handle. It thrives doing these types of interactions using something called dynamic panels. We're going to start in Figma again and get the basic layouts created. Instead of this prototype being a high visual fidelity like the last one, which is really just a fancy way of saying it looks really close to what the final product will probably look like, we're going to make the visuals more roughed in and really focus on the interactions first. This is an important stage to help focus the feedback you're getting on how the design works before everyone gets caught up in what icon or shade of blue you use. Now that I have both views or states for each component, it's time to make everything come alive in Axure. Instead of copying everything into Axure at once with this plugin, I'm going to copy it over view by view. This gives me more control over how Axure creates the dynamic panels. To make a dynamic panel, you can right-click on the selection and then convert to dynamic panels. Now, Axure knows to treat this as a single component that can have multiple different views or states that can all be manipulated through interactions. You can duplicate states that are going to be really similar or create them from scratch like I'm doing here. Now it's time to hook up the interactions in the interaction panel. For the toolbar, we'll do the most basic interaction, which is clicking anywhere on the panel flips it from viewer to editor mode. This can sometimes be helpful if a state change is triggered by something not on the UI, like a permission or time of day or project status. In a demo or usability test, you can use these types of interactions to quickly shift into your desired state through these kind of secret interactions. The main area has both a list of contents and a content preview. When a user clicks on any item in the list, I want it to open the preview. When they click on the back button in the preview, it should return to the list. Last up on the panel, we're using a tabs pattern, so clicking the tab title should switch the state to the selected tab. Here's the clearest example of how easy it would be to quickly make this a 3, 4, or even more tabs, and still really easily be able to build and maintain the interactions. Now let's see it in action. All of this works well, but now let's layer on that bit of extra complexity. While building a prototype, it's important to focus on user scenarios and not just try to hook up everything. So say in this case, we had a scenario that asked users to determine the details for a specific item in the list. Instead of having everything in the list look the same, I want to be able to observe how users go about finding that specific item. So it's important that my prototype can help me uncover that. In reality, at this point, I would likely start increasing the content fidelity of this prototype. That is, making the data and content more like the real world, while still not worrying too much about the visual fidelity. However, for the sake of this example, I'm going to simulate this with colors by having a blue, yellow, and red content item that when I click on them, will open a blue, yellow, and red preview, but more importantly, will also update the details to match. After I add the states for all the colors, I can easily add interactions to manipulate whatever dynamic panels I want. One way of doing this would be to simply add an action to the same click event that changes the main area state, but I usually like to make sure that the details will always be in sync regardless of what action changes the main content state. So I can hook up an event that waits for whenever this dynamic panel's state changes and then triggers. I add some conditional logic that checks what state the main panel is now and changes the panel's state accordingly. Now let's see what this looks like in the browser. I can click on each color and both the main area and the details now update realistically. This took about 15 minutes to hook up, which gives me lots of time to explore alternative interactions or layer on more complexity if necessary. Now let's flip back to Figma and see if we can get similar results without having to create a tangled mess of lines. Let's start with the simple version first. In our last video, I discovered much of the advanced prototyping capabilities is anchored around variants in components. So I'll first convert my design to use components and add a variant to each one that describes the states. I really like the way that Figma lets you lay out all the variants of a component on the canvas so that even people that aren't super familiar with your file can see all the possible states of this component up front. If you're not super familiar with setting up components with variants, there are lots of other videos on YouTube that go through that in greater depth. So I'm going to speed this up so we can get on to the juicy prototyping bits. Now it's time to hook these up. For the toolbar, it's just changing from one variant to the other if you click anywhere in it, which is really easily done. Looks good. For the main area, it was pretty straightforward to make only a portion of the component interactive. I'd love to introduce some animation between these two states, like the list sliding over to reveal the preview, but none of these options really seem to allow for you to do that on the entire component rather than what you've clicked on. So I'll have to learn a bit more about transitions before I feel comfortable adding that. The right panel tabs work the same way as the main area. Just select the frame that I want to be interactive and add the interactions. This was so much easier than it used to be. After I got the components all set up, took only about 3 minutes to hook everything up. Compared to the old way of doing things, which took me about 10 minutes, that's a really significant speed up. So the basic version worked great, but given how we hooked this up, I'm now really wondering if it's possible or not to make the interactions target things outside a given component. But let's give it a try. First, let's build out our colored states. Here, I like how you can have multiple properties per state. So we could have multiple lists and multiple previews and know where they're common and where they're different. Axure kind of flattens all that into a single list of states. Next, the interactions. Hooking up the main area to change to the correct preview is super easy. To change the details though, my first instinct is to add another action to this interaction, but the only other option that fits is change to, and then it doesn't give you any options to pick which component you want to change, which is a bummer. So let's back up a second and think about this a bit differently. I saw in one of the demo videos of Figma's new variable feature, the ability to shift from a dark mode to a light mode. In essence, that's kind of like what we're doing here, asking it to shift between the gray, blue, red, and yellow modes. So variables feel like it might hold the key. If only I could remember how to actually make a variable. Surely the only place to manage and create variables can't just be inside an interaction, right? I'll add that to my list of more to learn later. It looks like there's an option to do color here, but since in this case, the color is just a way to visualize the distinct content, I want to try out this being a string, or in other words, a word. So now when I click on one of the colored items in the list, I can tell this variable what color was clicked to hopefully drive things that happen outside of just this component. Now that all of the list items are hooked up to set that variable correctly, there's got to be some way of making the panel listen and then respond to that change. Remembering how we did the text on the tooltips in challenge 1, I'm checking out these little hexagon buttons in the component. This has promise. Okay, so this error means that it's trying to make sure all of the component properties and all of the variable values match up, which makes sense. And that's easy enough to fix. So is that it then? I guess only one way to find out. Boom! It worked! Oops, one little bug. We've got to make sure that we're setting the color back to the default, but that's not too hard to fix. Wow. I am not going to lie, I am a little speechless. I did not think that this was going to be possible, but in the same amount of time that I gave the Axure prototype, which is a tool that I've been using for 10 years, I was able to figure out how to get pretty much the same results in Figma. It's going to be really hard to declare a winner for this challenge. On the one hand, I know I have a lot of familiarity with Axure, so this might not ring true for newer users, but it feels a lot more straightforward to do this challenge in Axure. I can flexibly make any action point to any dynamic panel in a way that makes all of those interaction logic levels really easy to follow. However, in Figma, I can collaborate with team members a lot more easy, and it feels like an outside party, like a developer, could really easily see all of the possible states without having to click into each component and really know my file. That's really handy from a dev handoff perspective. The variables acting like global modes feels like it really covers a lot of what this challenge was trying to get at. And it allows you to do all of the work in the same tool, which was what I was hoping for at the beginning of this challenge series. The major knock against it feels like variables are just so out of the way and indirect and not clearly connected to trying to hook up the interaction events. But that might also just be my own lack of experience with variables. So this has definitely inspired me to learn more. I've decided to call this one a tie. Both tools were successfully able to complete this challenge and had their own benefits along the way. Let me know in the comments if you agree with this call, if you've tried this style of prototyping before, and if this video was at all helpful for you. In my next challenge, we're going to explore conditional behavior by creating a login form that validates the user input and disables a sign up button if the input isn't valid. I hope to see you there. Bye.